Hello, sculpture students. What we're going to be working with today is using those small forms that we created last week or last demonstration. And we're going to learn how to make a simple alginate, or what's called a piece mold or a rubber mold. There's a lot of different terms, but well, it's going to be a pretty simple little demonstration. It's going to be an easy exercise on how to take a positive shape like these small forms that we created. And we're going to go ahead and encase that around with a flexible material, which is your alginate. Okay, it's an algae based material that hardens into a rubber or almost a silicone type of consistency that we can then take the form out and then pour material. We're going to use plaster to create another positive of this piece. So just a real simple exercise, and it's going to take some materials, but not very much. Of course, you should have your bag of alginate. What I have here are two plastic containers. I got these at the dollar store, so they're pretty cheap. We probably have something like this in your kitchen somewhere, but we want to make sure that the container is not too big, okay, but also not too small. So you can see how I have a few pieces here that I'm going to demonstrate. Okay, they're all about, I would say about 2 inches to 3 inches at the most in size, and you can see how the container that I have uh, is large enough to encase the whole form, right, in or around that sculpture shape. So make sure you get a container about this size. I believe this is about a 13 to 15 ounce, okay? Maybe about a 2 cup container is probably what you need. And make sure it is plastic, right? You don't want metal, you don't want to use a can. And make sure that it has a shape that is wedged in a direction like this, wedge facing upward, so we can take the alginate mold out, and you'll see what I'm talking about when we get to that point. You're also going to need just a simple little ruler, more so I can show you, okay, the scale or how big of the objects I'm using. Just a simple paint mixer or a wooden spoon, something we can stir. You should have your quart container that is provided for you, okay, or at least a yogurt cup or something like that that is the size of a quart. Okay, you're gonna need some water. And it's always good to have two of these. So if you have two of these, that would work. And some plasticine, of course, some extra plasticine from your kit as well. So we can make some what's called casting caps. So, and we'll talk about that in a bit. And I have a few of our small little tools here. So when we do attach some plasticine together, we can sculpt it and make sure it looks nice. So we're going to get that together and we'll start our project. So I have a little close-up right here of the demonstration little sculpture that I have. And what we're going to need to do is attach a cap or a funnel so we have an area to pour our material into. Now, what we're going to be doing is creating a negative space of this positive space. So even though I'm saying that we're going to pour material into this, you're going to see that it'll be the negative space of these two shapes. Okay, so we're going to combine these two shapes together and then create a negative around that, and all that will make sense. What we're making here is called a simple mold, just a regular alginate mold. Okay, and what's nice about it is that if we do it correctly, and if we mix our material correctly, let it cure correctly, and allow the process and the material to do what it needs to do, we should get every single detail that we have, even the small little swipes and all the little textures. We should get everything that this sculpture detail-wise or surface-wise has. We should capture everything. So again, it's going to be a simple assignment, but it's going to be a little involved, so follow the assignment step by step and definitely take your time when you're doing it. because we want to maintain the integrity of your small sculpture as much as possible. So I'm still being very delicate with holding on to it. I have a nice little platform and I have an organized space. So because when we are going to mix our alginate, it's a time-based material, meaning that we only have a certain amount of time to work with it to achieve the detail and to get a successful mold so we have a good casting. Okay, so again, take your time and make sure you have everything ready and available. Okay, first thing I want you to do is to make some funnels. Okay, and this will all again make sense when we are going to be into the process. So, but you see this shape that I have here that is kind of a triangle with two caps at the top. Make sure you have enough and make sure it is large enough. Okay, so I have a ruler here, and you can see how I have about 1 inch width from the top and maybe about a 3/4 inch from the bottom. Okay, and then lengthwise I have about 1.5 inches, maybe about 1 1/4 inches. It doesn't have to be perfect, exactly what I have. Okay, but I do want you to not make it too small or too big. Okay, so you can see in size comparison to my sculpture here, right, where it is, about, I would say, 1/3 of the size of that sculpture, right? And the reason why you want to make it large enough is because we want to make sure that we have enough room to pour material in there. So you can just think of this as a funnel of some sort, just like how you're trying to put, oil in your engine or into a small container, you would need a funnel. So that's all this really is a funnel. So just make sure you sculpt it well, okay, right? And how I've sculpted it, I've simply always, like we always do, is made an orb. We start with a good clean surface because we want this to be nice and geometrical and cleanly sculpted. Okay, now I know you can see some texture in there, but that doesn't matter as long as the form is nice and round, okay, and at least sculpted somewhat well. So I'm going to do that really fast, okay, and you see how I also have my plasticine over there warming up in my regular bulb incandescent lamp. So I always have that to the side in case I need, to access some more plasticine. All right, so let me go ahead and make one really fast. Again, I'm going to make a simple orb. All right, and I'm going to just kind of make a cylinder out of it. Real easy. Okay, maybe kind of do some rolls. Again, if you start off with a nice, good, clean orb, you will be it will be easier to sculpt. And then I'm just going to use the simple curve of my thumb, right, and the index finger. I'm just going to not squeeze too much because I don't want it skinny, and then keep my fingers at the top there. So I'm doing a lot more pressure with my thumb than I am my index finger, just making kind of a cylinder. Real simple. I'm going to squeeze the bottom a little bit more than the top so I can make that more into a taper or a funnel. Okay, see I can compress that thumb with my index finger and sharpen the top of that shape. All right, and as long as you make that pretty clean and symmetrical, not too textured, you should be fine. Now again, this isn't part of your sculpture. We're going to remove this later on. Okay, but every step of the process you want to maintain a good level of craft. Okay, a lot of these little steps here, the viewer or whoever is looking at your art never sees, but still need to understand that the better you sculpt these processes or make these in between processes, these steps in between with a sense of craft, the better your outcome will be. Okay, so I have that, and you can see how that's a pretty good size. Might be a little big, okay, so I can take that down a little bit more. Squeezing the bottom here, slowly spinning it so I can get a good taper. There we go. Much better. Now again, that's all going to depend on your shape. Okay, for instance, if I'm trying to make a funnel for this shape, Okay, that's way too big. So I'm going to want to kind of take that down and make sure that's a little bit smaller. So, but again, remember, you're just learning. If you think it's too big or too small, well, go with your instinct, continue the process. And then, if it doesn't work, don't worry about it. It's all about just learning, and trial and error sometimes is the best way to go. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put that to the side. Okay, and all I'm going to do is find the smoothest, largest kind of surface area on my sculpture, depending on what it is, to place my funnel, okay, or my cap. Now I have some detail here, so I'm not going to place it where I have detail to cover up. I'm always going to choose a place, right, that I can clean, because I'm going to cut this off at some point, and I don't want too complex of a form or an area that I have to do a lot of sanding or carving or what's called chasing out. That's what it's called in sculptural vocabulary, meaning to clean off any discrepancies that came from the process of the mold. So in other words, if you see like a cast line on an action figure, like you'll see them down the hand with the plastic or something, that's been sanded at the factory to chase out that mold line of that figurine of some sort. So I'm going to choose here, okay, real simple area. When you do sculpture, as you're sculpting, you're taking all these processes into account, so next time you do a small form like this, you'll be thinking about, okay, well, as I'm sculpting this, there it is. As I'm sculpting this, I have to take in consideration where my funnel is going to be and all of that. Okay, so typically, that's what happens. When you get a little bit more experience, is you'll start to combine the process that you need, right, and the creativity. They'll work in harmony with each other, because they kind of have to. You know what I mean? When you work with sculpture, the materials are going to want to work a certain way, and the processes that you're going to have to work with materials, well, you have to dance with it a little bit, in comparison to drawing or painting. You can really just go at it, and everything will work. But sculpture is a little different. Okay, now this is plasticine, so I don't need to do any slipping or scoring. I just have to do some compressing to make sure that's not going to fall off. So you can see I'm getting my finger inside there and really compressing that into, making sure it's not going to fall off, but also being very delicate so I don't alter my form too much. You're going to see that you're going to continuously have to resculpt your form as you're working with these processes. You're going to continuously be defining any kind of inconsistencies that might have happened from the process of the mold or whatever. Okay, now you have a lot of little tools that you could use, so make sure that you do use your tools to clean up any area that might have gotten scarred or bumped. And again, just make sure you maintain a level of craft throughout the process. Okay. As you can see, I've attached my cap to it. Okay. Now, that looks pretty good to me. I'm going to continue to work on it, and then I'll fast forward a little bit, and we'll see how it turned out. Okay. See it all the way around. Just a nice good seal. I'm going to continuously kind of sculpt inside these areas here to make sure that's nice and flush and clean. Okay, I made some more funnels from other smaller sculptures, so just so you can get the different scale and how I would determine a proper funnel or a scale for a different shape. So that's a proper one for this curled form. Again, I really want you to try your best to sculpt those, even those funnels, like they're little sculptures in themselves. That's important because of the of what's needed sometimes to create a good casting. So do your best to see I'm even pinching and trying to get that corner nice and you know, again, using your fingers as these, you know, fine detailed tools that they are. So it's not messy, you know, and I still have work to do there. So you know, I can't stress enough these how much crap you got to put in some of these steps as well. And that really, because you know, if you spend so much time on an area like this, you know, smoothing it out, sculpting it, and then you know this part right here doesn't have that same integrity. Well, this is, you're relying on a lot of this to create this casting here. So this should be sculpted with as much integrity. So do your best, and then you know, just take your time, and that's really all. Just the key, just to take your time on things like this. This one right here. This is a more complicated little form, so I'm going to have to really find a better place, or you know, what's the best place to attach. And here, see this small area right there, I got a nice round form there. So and that seems like an area when I take off my cap, when they're casted, they're going to be all attached. It's going to be one cast of plaster with that funnel. So I'm going to have to chop that off and then sand it. So, you know, here's a good place I can clean and sand without worrying about too much detail. Okay, right there. So, and that's pretty good size. Right there, that could be a little bit smaller for that surface here. Should I get that in focus? So I could go a little smaller there. Let me try this one right here. That's a lot better. Okay, so that one's going to be that for that one. So again, you know, you're going to just kind of make your best judgment, spend time sculpting. Again, these little parts that we need, you know, it determines whether these are sculpted well or attached well, and that's going to determine whether or not you have a good casting. Okay, again, I want to work on these areas with my small tools. You know, just have fun with it. You know, working kind of like this can be very meditative. So I hope you guys, you know, put some music on or something, and you know, just get into it. Get into the, you know, it is relaxing. Okay, so that's a pretty good size funnel for that one. Again, I chose an area that wouldn't need too much detail. This one right here is a pretty simple shape right here. So I think I'm just going to simply put that one on top. That might be a little big. It is a little big, so I'll work that one down and then, you know, attach that one later, but I think you get the point. Okay, but this is the demo I'll be working on. I have these already attached, so you know, it's always good to work, you know, with more than one, because in case you don't like one, or in case one doesn't turn out, you know, you have the other one that you can start. So I'm going to go ahead and continue sculpting this, finish this out, and then we'll turn on to the next step. Okay, so I'm going to do the alginate casting now. So what you're going to need is some water, and what I've done is I put an ice cube in my water here, because the colder the water, the slower the alginate will cure, and we're going to want as much time as possible. So remember that this is going to be a time-based part of the process, so you're going to have to move swiftly when you're stirring into your quart cup. Make sure you are stirring really well and adding enough water so it's fluid enough in order for us to get some detail. Now remember, this is going to be probably your first time using it. You might have to do it twice, okay? And that's why I want you to get some good size smaller cups and not something too big, so you're not wasting too much material. You'll need your stir stick and everything organized and ready to go. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add water to one of my cups, so I know that I have a 2-part mix. You might have to add more water, so we'll go by look. And even though it's a 1-to-1 mix, 1 part water, 1 part alginate, sometimes you have to add a little bit more. because you'll see sometimes that it's a little thick, because all alginate works a little bit differently because they come from different processing areas. So you might have a different brand than mine. So it is a 1-to-1 mix, but just in case, have water ready to go in case we need a little bit more. And that's why at times we'll be going by the way it looks sometimes. So then after that, move that to the side. Let's go ahead and add our alginate. Again, it's a 1-to-1 mix. So I have 2 of these containers here, so I can be sure that I have, you know, somewhat accuracy. What's nice about making art is it doesn't always have to be completely perfect. Sometimes, you know, sometimes like cooking, you just go by feel. Okay, after I have my cup of that, I'm going to go ahead and add that to my quart container. That's going to be my mixing container. Okay, set that to the side. And then I'm going to go ahead and pour my material. I have my sculpture over here within reach because I'm going to want to dip that, and I don't want to have to look for it. I'm going to go ahead and add my water. And again, I want you to move pretty fast, okay, and start to stir pretty immediately. Now that's not enough water, I can already tell, so I'm going to go ahead, right, and add some more water in there, probably about another maybe half cup. And then I'm going to really want to stir pretty fast and pretty aggressively. Who cares if some spills out or whatever, doesn't matter. Okay. We'll keep moving, make sure I have no dry material. That's the key. Okay. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and add some more water. Get that moving. At some point, you're going to really want to start to stir it pretty aggressively. That's the key. Remember, no dry material. If you got any dry material, okay, I'm scraping the sides. Okay, good. Now, I'm going to transfer that over to a cup that I have, preferably your cleaner cup. Put that in there pretty fast. Gotta really move. Okay, plenty. Immediately grab your piece. Do some dips. Coat it as much as you can. Okay. Submerge it completely. See, I'm moving it. Okay. Moving it to get as much detail as possible. Again. Submerge that. Again, remember, you can probably use quite a bit of water. So don't be shy with the water. But you see how fast I have to move in order to achieve that kind of detail and to make sure that it's, you know, not too thick. Again, you might have to do this twice. So make sure you don't have too big of a container. All right, and it all depends on your piece, okay, and how big that piece is. Okay, now cleanup, it's pretty easy. You're gonna let that cure, and then when that cures, you can just kind of rip it out like rubber. Okay, now I'm gonna sit here, I'm gonna tap this every once in a while. Now you see how if I'm tapping, it's still kind of coming off of my hand. I'm going to keep doing that, you know, every so often until that stops, until that does not lift anymore. Okay. Now, let's say you accidentally submerge it all the way and you can't see the top of your funnel. Don't worry about that, okay? Because it's alginate. We can cut it. We can find that funnel top, okay? So don't worry about that. More importantly, that you get a good casting, okay, and you kind of be able to move it around, okay, to get a good coat, and also more importantly that you add enough water, that you're creating some fluidity. Remember, it's not going to get completely fluid. It's always going to have some cottage cheesy kind of a surface texture, okay, but liquid enough, right, that you can submerge it and that it's getting somewhat of a coat. Okay, I'll let that sit for about 10 minutes, then I'll check it. So here we are with the next step. I finished sculpting and am happy with what I have. What's cool about what we're going to be doing is that these will be casted in plaster. So we'll be able to chop that off with the little saw that I provided that you should have. And then we get to sand and continue to define the form. So and you can do that with all types of castable materials, whether it's bronze or aluminum or brass or plaster, all types of resin. So, if you're not happy with completely what you have, remember when it's in plaster, you then can go back in there and continue to smooth that out and get it as fine as you wish. But the next step here is to mix some alginate up in order for us to use our container here in order to cast. Now I have two containers here just so I can make sure that I'm getting equal amounts, because when you mix your alginate, it's a 1-to-1 mix. So that means 1 part water, 1 part alginate. I always add a little bit more of alginate just to make sure that I have enough, because it's really just fine kind of processed seaweed, so it's almost like just a super fine dust. What's great about it is that it's completely non-toxic. It's used for a lot of biological kind of applications, from dentistry to prosthetics, to all kinds of things. So mostly dentistry, because it's edible and it's non-toxic. So it's pretty much what they've been using to make molds of teeth and all that stuff. So pretty cool stuff. But again, remember, it is time fast. So when we mix, you have to be organized and you have to pay attention to it, because it reacts pretty fast. So what I want you to do, I want you to have your quart can ready, okay, your container. Okay, I want you to have your mixer ready, some water available, and of course your container here. So it's a 1-to-1 mix, so I'm going to have one container, okay, with the water that I'm going to need all the way to the top to make sure we have enough. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and fill my other container. And again, remember, it's a 1-to-1 mix. Okay, so I have two containers here just so I can make sure that I have enough. Keep going. Okay, I'm going to tap it up a little bit, make sure I have just the right amount. I am going to add a little bit more afterwards. Okay, but again, I'm just getting the amount that I need. All right, what I'm going to do, I'm going to add that into my container. Okay, and like I said, I always like to add just a bit more. So I would say maybe, okay, maybe about 1/3 of a cup more, just to be sure. All right, and sometimes when you work with these processes, it is all about the feel of it, or the way it looks. So you might see me add a little bit more water just to kind of get a sense of consistency that I want. So I have my empty container here ready to go. Okay, and I have my sculpture within reach, ready to go as well. Okay, next step, I'm going to go ahead and add my water. All the way. Okay, place that to the side. And that's looking pretty good. I'm going to start to mix as fast as I can. Here's the key here, is to make sure you get that mix going really good at some point. After you get it kind of controlled, then start to stir. Now, I'm observing it at this point. It feels a little tight. So I'm going to add a little bit more water. That's why I have a little bit more. So maybe about 3 tablespoons, just to make sure I can get it flowing. Keep mixing. Now, if you still get some dryness, go ahead and add more. So if it still is kind of cottage cheesy, add a little bit more. Keep going. Now, alginate's not going to get completely fluid. It's going to stay a little chunky, almost a little cottage cheesy, but again, if I'm getting more dry, making sure I get everything at the bottom, now I'm really stirring. Okay, and I'm going to add just a bit more. I'm only adding maybe about a tablespoon of water at a time. There we go. Okay, now, see a consistency there. I'm moving, making sure I have a good... Okay, now after I get to that point, that seems pretty good to me. Okay, now I'm going to get my cup and I'm going to go ahead and add all of that into that cup. Now you might get some dryness, but that's okay. I'm going to fill that in. Again, remember, you got to move fairly fast here. Cover that to the top. After I get that spackled, okay, then I'm going to submerge. Again, you're going to put a little pressure on it. Submerge that in. All the way to the bottom. Doesn't matter if it touches the bottom. Then I'm going to go ahead and compress that in. See how I have some of that top showing. Keep compressing it down. So you've seen how kind of swift and fast you have to work. And I think that's going to be the biggest challenge of this assignment, is to make sure that you are working attentively with the material, because if you're if you stop paying attention to it, then it will run from you, and then it's solid by the time you come back, or by the time you start paying attention to it. So there you go. Now I'm going to let that sit and cure. You see how I have a little bit of that exposed from the top. Okay. And then let it dry. Again, I'm going to keep patting it, but I'm going to give it a good 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll come back. Okay, so you can see from the video that I had to do this twice. So the first time that I did it, I didn't use enough water, and the second time I think I got it, and you can see the difference between the two. I'll zoom in here, and you can even see the difference between the textures of the two from that surface, and you can, right, and they're both nice and solid. So I mean, if that happens, and it might work, it might add a little bit more texture. Who knows? Who cares? Honestly, I mean, like I said, these things take a while to kind of master. You can see that one's nice and solid too, but definitely a cleaner surface there, a smoother surface, and I got some detail. So you might have to do it twice, and you'll see that that's just part of making sculpture. Is doing it more than once, like everything. So it's been about 10-15 minutes. Again, you can see how they're both cured, and the next step is to let's open them up and see some results. Okay, so after they are firm, okay, you can always bag it. You have to keep it moist if you want to wait overnight, or if you don't have if you can't open it immediately. You have to keep it wet, because alginate will shrink and keep shrinking. Okay, so go ahead and keep it wet if you can't do it immediately, but it's best to do it, I would say at least, an hour at least after you have cast it, so, you don't ruin any of your texture or your detail. Now remember, this one was a lot rougher, so I might get a lot less detail. This one is smoother, so I think this one's going to be the better casting of the two. So all you're going to do is flip it upside down, and let's release it from your cup mold here. Same thing with this one. Just kind of squeeze it, allow some air. Okay, and there we go. And I also want you to get just a regular knife of some sort, and we're going to cut it so we can release the plasticine from the inside in half, but not in two separate pieces. Now, if things start to chip off and then things break, well, don't worry, because we can fit it all back together in the cup. Now, this is my again, my first one, so it's going to have a lot more texture. So again, I'm going to start with that one, and you see I'm just cutting it directly in half. Any type of knife would work. Okay. Then I'm going to try to open it, and you can see how I'm going to try to show you the interior. You can see how there's the form inside there. So what I want you to do is try to gently release it. Again, if you rip any of your alginate, don't worry about it. Okay. Now again, remember, this one's a little texture because it was my first one and it didn't work out so well, so I might lose some pieces, but okay, well, there we go. It's not too bad. Okay, so we have our positive, and then we have created the hollow space of that positive space. There we go. Again, have a lot of texture on the interior because didn't mix it enough, but I'll still get a casting. You know, something will still happen with this one, and it could be interesting. Again, remember, let the process guide the possibilities or guide some of the sculpture. So this is not a total loss. Remember, as artists, we always see some of these accidents, right, are avenues for exploration. So accidents are good. All right, so let's do the second one now. Again, this is my better casting. You can see how it's really taken the shape of that container really well. So I'm going to cut this in half. Remember, don't cut it directly in half. Just try your best to open this one up. Okay. Okay, make sure that's completely cut. Okay, there it is on the interior. Okay, looking pretty good. Go ahead and see if I can release the rest of it. What's nice is that plasticine is oil-based, and the of course the alginate is water-based, so it just creates a natural resist, so it shouldn't stick at all. Got a little bit of grab there, but you know, again, I can always what's called chase it out. I can always repair it after it's been casted. Okay, well, there you go. There is the negative space of that. Okay, put it back into the container. And again, if it didn't work out, you still have your forms. Okay, they don't look too damaged at all. You can always repair anything and try it one more time. You can try it as many times as you want. Okay, like this, I can actually kind of probably try to fit this back in there, but no need to it. I don't. It doesn't really. Again, I like seeing what happens with the process, and you know, it's almost a type of expression itself. Is, you know, some of the marks of the process. Okay, so we have our two molds here, and we are ready to cast them. Okay, so here I have the materials ready for casting. I have my clean quart can. I have my other quart container here with cold water, more for rinsing and cleaning, so my stir stick doesn't get plaster all over it. I have a container here of warm hot water So make sure that you're going to use warm hot water this time because we want our castings to cure pretty fast this time, okay? And then of course your plaster here. And remember, it's always good to use a dust mask when you're using and mixing any plaster or dry material like this. Again, it doesn't do anything to your hands. But good dust masks would work. And let's do this. So we don't need that much plaster because these are only two really small pieces, but I want to be able to make a little disc here, maybe a little platform that we can put your one of my little sculptures on. So I'm going to mix enough. Always mix more than you need because you know it's always good to have extra. So I'm going to probably fill my container to about 1/4 liter. Okay, which would be, you know, maybe about 1 inch of water or so. Okay, of course, remember, we don't have to be exact. Okay, we're making art. It's, you know, we want to have fun. Okay, but that should be plenty because remember, like plaster does double. It's a 1-to-1 mix of water and plaster, so it will double. So remember, if I fill this halfway, I'm going to have a full container. So we don't need that much, but I want some extra so I can make a little platform, and you'll see in a bit. So remember, to mix plaster in a container, like a cylinder here, we want to add plaster until we have a little volcano forming in the center that is not collapsing. That's a good way for us to just visually mix plaster without having to measure or do, you know, too much of that busy work. So I'm just going to start adding right in the center. Shouldn't take me very long. Again, I've used warm hot water so I can allow it to cure a little faster. If I was wanting it to cure a little slower, I would use cold water. And keep adding. Right in the center. And remember, plaster is calcium carbonate. Pretty much prehistoric ancient seashells. Okay, almost there. Now getting a little volcano forming right in that center. Keep going. Now that, remember, that volcano is still sinking, so I'm going to keep adding little by little. You see I'm adding slowly because I don't want to add too much, especially when you're casting. You know, you want that cast to be nice and cured perfectly. Still collapsing a bit. Keep adding. Okay. I'm going to pause there for a bit. I'm going to add a couple more. Good little handfuls. And if that plaster stays right there and it's staying firm, I think I have a pretty good amount there. All right. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and wet my hands a little bit. Get that plaster off. And you have a lot more time, remember, not like alginate. And before you start, I want you to wait a little bit. Let that plaster really soak into that water because we want that to be as fluid as possible. Again, you know, this is your first casting here in your first little mold, or even if you've done it before. You know that you never know what happens when you do these kind of quick processes. You know, you can do it 1,000 times and then, you know, it's still, you know, you'll still won't get it perfect. That's not the point when you make art. You know, the point is, again, you know, what happens with these processes. Are there possibilities with the moments that weren't planned, right? Or or the moments that something else happened, right? And it took you to a different direction, visually, formally, process wise. Again, it's the journey with sculpture. When we're trying to do something perfect, you're getting to more of a design kind of oriented way of working, almost like a functional design, right? Okay, now that's soaked for a bit. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start stirring. And again, that just helps it mix a little bit, or stir a little bit easier. It's not so chunky on the inside when you let it sit for a bit. And remember, how do we know that we have a good mix, right? Is if you just get your finger or your hand, and you should have a nice, good coat without any of your, skin tone showing. Okay, so that looks pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and rinse that off. Okay, and I'm going to have quite a bit more plaster, but again, I'm going to leave the rest of it inside the container, so I have a little disc. Okay. Now, again, I'm going to want to get as much detail as I possibly can. All right. So before I just pour it in there, I'm going to do a little detail coat first. So right after you pour, or you mix, I'm sorry, you're going to go ahead, and I want you to, let me zoom in a little bit here. I want you to pour all the way to the top, and then I want you to pick it up and hold on to your mold, and I want you to spin it. And as you're spinning it, I want you to pour it out. I want you to get a good coat on the inside. See how I'm spinning it, rotating it, and then pouring it out. I want to make sure I get no air bubbles, and I'm coating it completely. I want to do that a few times. Okay, and give it a good coat. Okay, I'm going to do the other one. And I want to pay attention, because I don't want to, okay, I'll pour it out. I don't want to take too long, because remember, my plaster is curing, so I want to always pay attention to the plaster to make sure it's not curing too fast. Now remember, sometimes plaster does that. Sometimes it'll cure a little faster than other moments, or other times you've mixed. Okay, I'm going to do that. Now I've coated that interior there. I'm going to make sure I keep stirring my plaster here. That helps prevent that plaster from sinking down to the bottom. Okay. So you see how I'm waiting just a bit, making sure that I'm pouring next in a bit. It's not going to take very long. Okay, I'm going to pour, and then I'm going to go slowly. I'm going to pour halfway, and then I'm going to shake it, then fill it up. You never want to just pour it all in one setting. So first you're going to coat it, right? And then you're going to pour it again. Now make sure you pour that pretty slowly. I'm going to zoom in here so I can really show you what I'm talking about. Again, you have to imagine that you've really worked on a form. Again, we're just doing a simple assignment now, but you can imagine when you have worked on a form for let's say days or weeks even. Okay, you are going to want to make sure that you get that casting the best that you can. Okay, so I'm going to pour. I want you to pour it real thin like that, because that squeezes out the air bubbles that are in, and you can see how the air bubbles are squeezing out. Okay, before I fill it up, I'm going to do a little shake. Then I'm going to fill it up all the way to the top. And you would do that exact thing, whether it's in resin, whether it's in concrete, whether it's in, um, wax, and all those things that we want to cast into at some point. Okay, now let me do this one now. Make sure I get that in focus. There we go. Okay. Also, always remember to stir. You do that a little bit. Make sure you get that plaster nice and mixed. Okay, for this one. Okay, almost. I'm going to fill that one up. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and tap that, make sure all those bubbles are as much as, Okay, same thing with the other one. I'll tap the other one a little bit too. All right. Okay, so I have those casted. Now be careful because remember your plastic container is flexible. So at some point when your castings here start to cure, you don't want to flex it too much because then you'll crack the plaster, and that will kind of destroy the integrity of that casting. Okay, so you got to be patient with it. Now with this right here, I want you just to keep this here completely, leave it alone. I have a good 1/4 inch or 1/4 liter of plaster that's going to get hard in there, and then I'm going to see if I can release that and make a little pedestal for maybe one of my sculptures here. So I'm going to let that cure. Remember, in plaster has a good maybe 20-minute cure. Make sure that you keep topping it off if in any case that your casting starts to sink. Top it off a little bit at the top. Okay, I have a little brush here so I can go ahead and clean off some of the debris. And all that stuff you see there, all the little, all those bumps there, well, that's air pocket or air bubbles from when I did submerge it. I had, it was a little bit too, was already carrying a little bit fast, but other than that, I have a pretty good casting. See if I can get it in focus pretty fast. And you can see how, I even got some pretty good detail. And I can clean this up, carve it. So that's a successful casting. Even though it didn't come out perfect, all this can be repaired. Very rarely does a cast come out of a mold completely perfect, unless you're doing some mass-produced, object. Like if you look at Nike's pretty amazing metal molds, you can see those online. That stuff, it's made and designed to be casted millions of times. But this right here, there's a lot of interesting things happening here. So I like this. I can work with this. Again, we're going to chop these off later on, this top area right here. And then, you can make it look exactly how you want it. But we have a positive now from a negative to a positive cast. Let's open the other one up. I'm excited to see the other one. Okay. Same thing with this next one. You zoom out a little bit. Okay. And this alginate here, it's disposable, completely, like I said, non-toxic. So you can definitely put it in the trash and not worry about it. Okay. Again, you want to be gentle with opening up your casting. And in order to make a good sculpture, you have to remember that at any moment you could break it. Remember, it's still just material. So even though, one part of the process is successful, okay, coming along. Okay. Gently take that out. There it is. Got some good detail. And some of these alginate molds, if you do it well enough, you can even cast probably multiple pieces if I were to gently fit that mold back together. But there it is. I'm going to see if I could scoot it just a bit. There we go. There's a good detail shot of it. I haven't really brushed it off, so I do have a lot of debris on it. Do a little brush off. Again, I got some air bubbles on this as well, so I'm going to want to clean that up and chase it out. But again, got some pretty good detail. If you look at that kind of spot right there, I mean, that's pretty good detail for a small little quick mold. That's a flashing right there. I mean, that's where the mold was cut, and I have a little bit of spill off, but again, that can be all cleaned off and sanded and sculpted. Okay, all right, so I'm going to clean these off a little bit, right, and then see you in a little bit. Okay, so now I'm ready to do some cleanup on my small castings, and there's some tools that you have in your kit, or that are probably just laying around the house. But this right here is a small trimmer that's primarily used for pottery and trimming for pottery, but sculptors use it as well. It's a nice curve, and that's another way one way we can clean it up. Just a good old box cutter, razor blade will work just fine. Plaster soft enough. An X-acto blade, if you have one of those. This is a kind of a specialized one from a sculpture toolkit, but just any X-acto knife. And I also have some other, again, smaller sculpting tools that you can make pretty easily out of just pieces of wire or anything that's kind of rigid and somewhat sharp. Or again, you can buy those at the art supply store. Nice little sheet of sandpaper. Soft, plaster is really soft. It's wet still because we didn't cast it. We casted it not too long ago, so it'll still have some moisture, but definitely sanding is a way that you can go. And of course, there's all types of grits of sandpaper. This is a rough one just for taking off big pieces, but you know, you can always get some softer sandpaper. And I'm just gonna sit here and just do a little bit of cleaning to show you how I would do it. You know, I'll go ahead and fast forward to show you a completed piece or somewhat completed. Oh, and also one more thing is a small little saw here that it's just a piece of bandsaw that I cut. But any type of little saw, even a serrated kitchen knife or a old steak knife that has the teeth would work well. But just something like that that we can saw. But all I'm going to do here is just, you can see I'm going to start to clean up some of the areas that that are a little bit, you know, textured here. And again, remember, it's plaster, so it's pretty soft, but still, you know, it's going to take some amount of accuracy for you to get that shape correctly. And like I said, you know, even though this first casting didn't come out exactly the way I wanted, I don't really worry about those types of things. I mean, I really just enjoy the process and seeing what happens. And again, every time you do something like this, you'll get it better and better. So always take that in consideration, and you know, keep these things, keep them around the coffee table, around the house, so you can always look at them. Well, the reason why I wanted you to make a kind of a form that you held interesting in your hand is because, you know, maybe it's a way to live with the sculpture for a little bit. You know, if you're watching TV or hanging around, you know, keep this in your pocket, take it out, you know, look at it in different types of environments and different types of light. Remember, it's plaster, so you know, you can even paint it with pretty much anything. You can draw on it with pencil. So much you can do to it in order to kind of just see what are the possibilities. But you can see how it's not too hard to carve. You know, again, the drier it gets, the harder it's going to be to carve. But you know, it's still pretty simple. You know, so you can see how I can just spend as much time chasing and cleaning and getting that as accurate as I want to. You know, and I want you to try to get it pretty accurate. I want you to, you know, experience the chasing. Now, reason why I think this is a good little assignment is because if you were to ever do metal casting, bronze and even jewelry, you know, precious metals, silver, you know, you would be working with wax, and you would be doing the same thing. You'd be casting a form out of wax, or sculpting a form out of clay or wax, and then cleaning up that wax with some small tools. And of course, if you want to make more than one, you would make a mold so you can cast multiple wax forms. And each one of those you would have to at some point clean up. Again, it's called, chasing out, making sure all the mistakes. Okay, you can see I'll give it a little sandpaper, just do a little brushing. Remember, it's plaster, so it's pretty soft, so it will cut. Again, here, this is going to be a little bit more involved, but of course I'm going to want to go ahead and take my little saw and just do a little trim. Real easy. Chase that off. There we go. Okay, there it is. Take some sandpaper to it, possibly some carving. Again, if you use an X-acto, be very careful, don't cut yourself. But I think you get the picture in a sense where I can just continue on and make this as perfect as of course as I want to. And I want you to really try to make that perfect. And I'm sure you have some of these tools hanging around the house. Let's see what happens. Okay, so that one's coming along. Just the small amount of time that I spent. Already it's looking pretty good. Again, I'm going to keep going, and hopefully that will turn into something a lot more clean, a lot more interestingly. And remember, this was my first mistake. This was the one that I thought that wasn't going to come out, and look, it's not too bad already. All right. What I've done here, and I think it's a good idea for you to do too, is to get a light. So I just have my incandescent light that I use for heating up my plasticine, and I just have it for a direct light shadow as I'm doing some of this detail work. So it's probably a good idea for you to grab a lamp or something and just directly spotlight it from one direction, even in a dark room. And I think that will help you to see the shadow. Because remember, a lot of what we're doing here is just, we're trying to dance with light and shadow. So if you're working like underneath a fluorescent light, that's going to really just wash out the shadow. So try to get a light bulb or an incandescent, or or even a candle would work really well for you to see some of those shadows and how they're doing. So this is the second piece, and you can see I just started chasing it out. I got a lot of work to do on it. Oh, not a lot, just just enough to get some of this small texture off. So direct light will help you see the shadow. Right, there it is. I'm really liking the way that's looking. Okay. Okay, last step here. Let's get the plaster out of the bottom of that quart can. Okay, so I've moved it. I've kind of squeezed it by the rim area here, or right by the plaster line, to kind of get some air in between it. Turn it upside down, and there we go. Okay, so, and this will be really just kind of a small platform that we could use, but let's just place it right there. Okay, and let's go ahead. All right, and that'd be a good little platform, so we can kind of get a good sense of how that sculpture is going to look. So let's place this one down, and I want you to do the same thing. I want you to display it. Okay, let's do a spotlight on there. Okay, maybe a little. Turn off that one. Let's zoom in a little bit here. And as you can see, not too bad for your first, a simple casting. And I want you to just kind of sit and really just observe the way the shadows break over that form. And, you know, um, always imagine if you were, you know, if this was a 10-foot tall structure, a 20-foot tall structure, because there's a lot of good stuff happening. And what's great about kind of these forms here is we're working in these in with plaster and what's great about working with plaster and making a cast like this is that now you have a pretty solid piece here that that you can then really sand down and polish and get it perfect and then make a mold out of this, right? And then you can make multiple molds because unlike the plasticine, this won't break or alter when you are take it out of the mold, so you can make multiple molds out of it. You can use the shape over and over again. So basically what we've made here is kind of a prototype, you know, or what we call in sculpture a test cast. Plaster is always used to cast a test out of the mold to see how it looks, to see how it worked. But remember, it's also a pretty nice material because we're dealing with a real historical material, plaster. It's been around forever. And remember, it's ancient seashells. That's pretty much what we're working with here. So from the seaweed, from the alginate to the seashell of the plaster casting, we are working with Mother Nature in a very very interesting way. So I really hope that you enjoyed the demo, and I hope that your small sculpture, your small castings are interesting and fun to make and fun to look at. And hopefully you'll be able to take it in your pocket and walk around and just hold on to it and hold it up to the sunlight, so you can see how I hold on to this in various ways. And remember, it's a completely reborn sculpture from a negative, from the hollow space of the mold, and here it is, birthed again in a different form, in a different material, taking on a whole different feel to it. So, again, thank you very much, and I hope you have fun.